Hey everyone, it's the Knitty Professor, and I don't know about you, but I'm more of a solstice girl than a Christmas girl. I like both, but I'm kind of big into solstice, and this project that I just finished kind of got me into a contemplative mood, and I thought I would share some thoughts about knitting and crafting through this season. Of some of us enjoy thinking of it as Advent, some of us enjoy thinking of it more as solstice. I like the solstice idea because it has more of the vibe of like nature and how nature really impacts, especially those of us in the farther reaches of the hemispheres, northern, southern hemisphere, just, are the rhythms of our life. So this beautiful yarn I spun, I shared it last night as a short. In fact, of course, obviously I put away the label, but the darkness with the colors blended in really helped to put me in a late end of year, looking at the new year kind of mood. I don't know, it's just a really contemplative blend. So I finished this yarn last night. It smells like the wool wash I used on it, and not sure what I'm going to make with it, but it's going to be something special, and I have more I'm going to spin up. We'll talk about that as we go along here. But along the way, I just want to share some thoughts with you as far as the idea of like knitting, crafting in the wilderness, waiting for that which is to come, which is the return of the light, or in the case of those of you who think about Advent, the return of the sun. S-U-N-S-O-N, right? It's a really great play on words. I like that. It's the daughter of Episcopal family, and someone who's turned to UUism since then. There's a lot of blending of traditions and the thinking that goes on in our house. So let's look at a few ideas. The idea of the wilderness is a place where you can kind of strip down to the essentials. Knitting in the wilderness can be or spinning, right? I'm thinking about spinning, but actually I have some knitting I can do. It can sort of almost be a return to that which is essential, letting go of excess and recognizing the slowness of crafting, of getting things done, where you can indulge in the process without worrying about accumulation. Hands, fiber, breath, time. That's kind of what counts, when we're doing this sort of thing. And when we reduce our lives to that which is really critical and sort of get rid of all that dross, the wilderness is a really good metaphor for thinking about what do I really need, and what can I get away without, and what can I do without that will help me to sort of refocus my energies on that which is truly important in life, be it family or pets. I've got my old dog Steven behind me, home and hearth, community, those kinds of things. Another thing that's really big in thinking about the solstice is the idea of a turning point. I remember one time one of my pastors used the metaphor of Janus, with the face, the one face turned backwards and the other face turned forwards. And that's, of course, where the word January comes from, the beginning of the year or the end of the year, just that juncture, that point of turning where you're preparing for the return of the light. And you can look on it as a process that unfolds in the darkest days, stitch by stitch. So you want to acknowledge the depth of the night, acknowledge the loss that we associate with that, the grief that we associate with that, but also acknowledge that which is to come, the positives. And that's a motif that actually the novel I'm writing now, which is about my family, where they have the gene for retinitis pigmentosa, they're facing that too, someone acquires a disability that can be a huge turning point. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a catastrophe. It can also be a new opportunity to live life in a new way. So the idea of the turning point and the idea of relating our crafting to preparation, contemplation, I think can be very meaningful, can be very useful. It's sort of a much nicer refuge than the rush of shopping for those last minute gifts that a lot of us are engaging in today. I just had to make one last purchase, and I had to go and order the 2-day delivery for the extra expense, make sure it gets there in time, and all that stress. This is so much nicer. Another notion that we can associate with the idea of knitting and crafting as a kind of refuge in the wilderness is survival. Hand knitting is survival, a mechanism of survival. It certainly was that for decades, centuries, for ancestors, crafting of all kinds. Go back all the way to, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, to nail binding, which is a craft I would like to learn. Maybe I could do that over the summer, over the break. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about summer already. We have a dog named Summer, but yeah, I'm already looking forward to summer. In any case, we're not there yet, so I've got to prepare. And knitting can also be a kind of sanctuary, and spinning is a sanctuary. I mean, I've definitely felt sort of enfolded in protective warmth as I was sitting there behind my spinning wheel, spinning up that night glow fiber. And I was listening to music from a Winter Solstice. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with that, the Windham Hill recordings back from the 90s, but it was really, really nice, really relaxing, and it felt just like a sanctuary. Beyond that, let's look at the idea of silence. You know, we talk about silent night, and those of you who are, you're getting book 2. I'm still waiting for Ingram and Spark to get their act together, but we've got it on Amazon. We've got it on all kinds of ebooks. There's this whole silent night section in the novel, which I think you'll appreciate. It's very appropriate for now. So the repetitive motions of knitting and spinning echo the hush of the snow-covered ground and the contemplative silence that we traditionally associate with the wilderness and the idea of waiting for what is to come. Certainly we've had a lot of snow-covered ground around here since Thanksgiving. Ever since my aborted trip to Omaha to see my daughter, I have been trying to enjoy the snow cover, and it is amazing how it can kind of silence things. It dampens everything, you know. And then you start waiting. You're like, you look at the plants, I'm like, kind of waiting for them to turn green again, kind of waiting for I mean, we literally had dandelions into November. It was insane, and now I'm going to wait for them to return. I love those yellow flowers. Advent as a motif, as a season, the belief, also it's connected with the idea of waiting with a kind of intentionality, waiting with intent. And as we make these little small stitches and rows, knowing, you know, like this sock, eventually it's going to become the full sock I intend it to be, because I have that intent. Every row is like a small, faithful act of expectation, of slow, almost invisible progress, but very real, tangible progress. I can relate that too to our puppy. When I got him, the breeder said that he was less than 6 pounds, and that was not quite 2 weeks ago. And now I swear he's probably 15. And I don't notice it from hour to hour, but boy, from day to day, it's like, whoa, yeah, you know, it's like you take care of that creature, that being in your life. It could be any life, you know, it could be a child, it could be a plant, it could be an amaryllis. I mean, and you don't see the growing from one moment to the next, but you know it's there. It's like with this sock, you know, it's like a metaphor. It's a really cool metaphor. So now we can turn to the idea of provisioning for the future, for that which is to come, for the next year, working with what we have on hand as a reflection of wilderness scarcity, but also as a trust that we will have enough. We will have enough. You know, it's like looking on, I look at my stash, right? And the crazy, wacky way in which I've accumulated it. And I don't have to look much farther than that to recognize, you know what, I have enough. I'm going to be fine. I have enough. This wilderness is not as bleak as it may seem. Here's another cool thought that we can associate with knitting. It's probably one I've shared before, but it's fun to kind of review some of these. The idea of knitting and crafting or spinning, crocheting, anything is a sort of embodied kind of prayer. It's an embodied reflection, a form of attentiveness and of grounding, spiritual grounding through your body. Any kind of physical repetitive motion can serve that purpose. Our church has what we call movement prayers. But dance, you think about the Shakers and their association with dance, and the Quakers, the same. The body as the manifestation of spiritual presence, spiritual attentiveness. And I like to think too, I always like to think of prayer as like the idea of positive thinking, the power of positive thinking. Another thing that's kind of a cool metaphor that we can imagine with this idea of the wilderness, of knitting, crafting in the wilderness, is crafting as an activity, a creative activity that's not accompanied by spectacle. It resists performance, and it doesn't always, but it can resist productivity. And productivity is something that we're always inclined to measure and increase and quote unquote improve. I think about my younger son working at a warehouse, and they have all these metrics, productivity, It's really nice to just get away from that and to just do something, to craft something where, again, it's growing and it's going to amount to something, but you're not just focused on the product. You're focused on the process. And it's not performative. It's not like like when I play the French horn, I feel like it's kind of dumb if I just practice in the basement of my house. Now, maybe that's wrong, right? There are probably plenty of people who like to make music just for themselves. And to be honest, I kind of do that with the piano. But I've never set out to go in front of people and knit for the sake of it and consider that a performance. So you can produce works of art, right? And there is such a thing as performative art. And that's not something that I totally neglect in my novels, especially with the YouTube videos. You'll see in book 2 what I'm talking about. But in this instance, I think when we're thinking about the contemplative aspects of knitting and spinning, then we want to focus more on the process and the contemplative aspect of just rhythmically making stitches one by one. Sometimes, people had to knit in the cold, and that's why they needed those warm things. But while they may have had cold hands, they had a warm purpose. And you can think about the contrast between the physical cold of this season of the year and the inward idea of warmth. And it kind of mirrors the paradox of the solstice. Now, those of you who are in Australia, you've got the opposite thing going on. You've got, summer coming to an end spring, right? Spring coming to an end, and you're heading into summer. So, the sun is going to recede. But for us here in the north, the sun is going to return. So while we're experiencing the oncoming cold, we're preparing mentally for the warmth that's on its way. And the minute we get around Christmas time, I can already tell those days are getting longer. Yay. Spring is on its way. It's just cold hands, but warm purpose, getting ready for the light and the warmth, and also, the idea of shedding that warmth, gifting that warmth at this time of year. Some of us do knit for gifts, and I have a couple projects. I don't know if I'll finish them, but I think they will provide warmth to my children whenever I get them done, even if my hands are cold, as I sit with my thermostat set a little bit lower than I might normally prefer. There's a lot of uncertainty at this time of year, and there's more uncertainty than usual for a lot of us with the situation around the world. I mean, just thinking about the shootings, the murders that have occurred this past couple of days, it's just, it's extremely unsettling. But when we knit, we take this thread, or we spin, and we spin a thread. We can also look on it as a breath of certainty, like following a thread through the uncertainty that often governs our lives. The thread can be construed as a path through the wild. The yarn offers us direction when the terrain that we currently inhabit feels uncharted. I think that's a lovely metaphor for thread, and it's very heartening. I really like thinking about that. Advent is also a period when, the work is not yet done. We're in a season of preparation, and knitting, spinning, all that stuff is something where incompletion is embedded in the craft. There are a lot of crafts, like if I do a crossword puzzle, I get that sucker done in 20 minutes, maybe 10. I'm like, okay, I'm done. But with something like this, I've knit on these socks for months. And I kind of celebrate that. It's like, the whole idea behind it, apart from, okay, wearing the socks in the end, yeah, I look forward to that. But it's just the process of making them, the process of enjoying this lovely yarn as it continues to grow into a sock. Incompletion is kind of celebrated. It's like the hope is alive, the hope is still forming. It's growing like the cells in my puppy's body, How hope really is not the kind of thing that ends. It's a verb. It's not a noun. And knitting is a verb too, Spinning is a verb. Crocheting, all of that, crafting, it's a verb. It's a process. It's alive. It's incomplete because the completion is basically the end. That's death. That's not what this is about. This is about life. This is about living. This is about progress. This is about growing. And in the end, when you emerge from even, a small completion, that's still part of a process. This time spent in the wilderness can prepare us to re-enter community where, if we're lucky, we're carrying something that's just a little quieter with us. Patience, steadfastness, one of the values that I emphasize so much in my books, especially once I introduce book 5 with the blind character, resilience, and light made tangible, just the light that we carry within us as compassionate human beings is sort of made into a tangible form when we produce something with our hands and our hearts. It goes together. It's not like, manufacturing a box in a factory. This is human work here. This is not the work of a machine. And even this yarn that I made, it's a work of art. It's beautiful, but it's also not done because we don't know yet what this is going to become. There's hope embedded in this chunk of floof. And I already have another project queued up for spinning. I have a little more time lately since I finished my Anatomy of the Eye course. I'm going to spin from Frabjous Fibers, this baby right here, which I got, I can't even remember. Oh, I got it somewhere in Omaha, at Imagine It in Omaha. Maybe you're familiar with that store. Organic Polworth wool top for hand spinning. You can also felt with it. I don't felt, but maybe one of these days I will. But this looks like a lot of fun. So it's got some great colors. I do love the neon green, and I love the blue, and I love how the neutral white and black kind of draw out those bold colors. So I've divided this into thirds, and when I spin it, I'll just, I could even use a diz, but I could just, grab thin strands, and then I will stretch them out, stretch the fibers out. This has got a pretty long staple, so I have to reach a good 6 inches here to draw this out, and that will prepare me for spinning it up. So I'm looking forward, and this is, it's something I've had in my stash for probably a year. Glad it was there. Glad that my wilderness is provisioned with something that I can enjoy turning into more beautiful yarn, and then contemplating what will it become as I make that happen. Another project that's very contemplative, I could show you my progress on this. It's the sweater that I'm making with yarn I previously spun, and it's a long-term project, but this is the Helix knitting, and it's very fun to watch these stripes unfold on this. Really turning out beautiful, I think. It's just going to be a lot of pinstripe glory. So a couple of you commented for me on here that I should try this. And now that I'm trying it, I can see myself turning to helix knitting over and over again. In fact, I plan to show this to my son, my younger son, who really wants me to knit more stuff for him, and ask him, would you enjoy having a sweater made with that technique? We'll see what he says. See what kinds of colors he thinks would work well. So that's what I have for today. I do hope that this last week or so before solstice and Christmas does not stress you out too much. I know there are some people for whom this holiday season is just hard. And if you are one of those persons, I hope that my video brings you a bit of joy and that your crafting will likewise bring you some joy. So happy holidays. I appreciate your listening. And if you have any comments to add to the idea of knitting in the wilderness, crafting during Advent, feel free. It's always wonderful to see what the community comes up with on this channel, which I work very hard to keep advertisement free and all that good stuff, because that's not what we're about. Y'all take care. We'll talk soon. Bye.